Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at libertarian socialism. And for this one, we're going to be using excerpts from Noam Chomsky's book, Radical Priorities.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I actually picked this one out specifically for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because, I know you're really interested in alternative economic models, and I thought that
Right.
Chomsky's ideas about self-management and really challenging these traditional power structures, I think would really resonate with you. So are you ready to dive into some thought-provoking ideas about human nature and power and maybe the possibility of a truly free society?
I am so ready. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
So one of the things that I find really fascinating about how Chomsky frames this is how he carefully distinguishes libertarian socialism from other ideologies,
Okay.
like liberalism.
Yeah.
He really wants us to understand, what makes this vision unique.
So he starts by comparing libertarianism with liberalism. Those are two terms that I think people often use interchangeably, right?
Right. Yeah. And Chomsky would argue that that confusion is intentional.
Okay.
And so he defines libertarianism as a philosophy that puts creativity at the heart of human need, advocating for self-management and freedom from coercive institutions,
Okay.
whether that be the state or big corporations.
So it's not just about individual liberty in a vacuum. It's about sort of flipping who has the power.
Right.
So instead of corporations or, just a few elites at the top
Yeah,
deciding how things are run, it's you and your community deciding how things are run.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And that's where the contrast with liberalism comes in.
Okay.
Chomsky argues that while liberalism often focuses on individual liberty, it does so within the framework of capitalism,
Okay.
which he would say can actually lead to greater social inequalities.
So more individual liberty can lead to more inequality.
Yeah.
How does that work?
I know, it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But think of it this way. If everyone has the freedom to pursue their own self-interest without any regard for the common good,
Okay.
then those who already have wealth and power are more likely to succeed, further concentrating wealth and power at the top.
I see. So just focusing on individual freedom without addressing sort of the underlying economic system can actually perpetuate those systems of power and control that libertarianism actually wants to dismantle.
Exactly. Chomsky argues that true freedom requires both individual liberty and social and economic justice, which he believes can be achieved through libertarian socialism.
Okay. So we're starting to see the foundation of his argument.
Yeah.
I think to really grasp libertarian socialism, we need to understand these four key choices that he identifies: libertarianism, socialism, egalitarianism, and self-management.
Absolutely. Those are the four pillars.
Yeah.
These choices offer a framework for understanding how a truly free and just society could be structured.
So we already touched on libertarianism, but what about socialism? I feel like that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, often with some pretty negative connotations.
Right.
How does Chomsky define it?
Yeah, so for Chomsky, socialism means advocating for social ownership and democratic control of the means of production. So imagine a world where the workers who make the goods and provide the services also have a say in how those businesses are run and where the profits are shared more equitably.
Okay, so instead of a system where a small elite controls most of the wealth and the resources, socialism aims to create a system where everyone has a more equal stake in the economy.
Exactly.
Okay, and I can see how that ties directly into the concept of egalitarianism, which is another one of Chomsky's key choices.
Yes, egalitarianism emphasizes social equality and aims to eliminate hierarchies and disparities in power and wealth.
So give me an example of what that would look like.
So think of it this way. Imagine a world where your access to healthcare wasn't tied to your job or your wealth.
Right.
That's what egalitarianism aims for, is a level playing field,
Gotcha.
where everyone has equal opportunities and access to essential resources.
That makes a lot of sense. So it seems like he's really pushing for a major restructuring of how our society functions at a fundamental level.
He is, and a key part of his argument involves recognizing how those in power often manipulate systems, even those that appear democratic, to maintain control.
Okay.
He calls this brainwashing under freedom.
Wait, so he's saying even in democracies, there's this kind of hidden control going on. Now I'm starting to see why you picked this book out for me.
Yeah.
I'm all ears. Tell me more.
So in a totalitarian system, propaganda is obvious and easy to reject.
Right.
But in a system that claims to be free, the control can be much more subtle, even embedded in the very fabric of society.
Okay.
And Chomsky would argue that that makes it harder to even recognize, let alone challenge.
So how do we break free from this?
That's where Chomsky's critique of the media comes in. He actually calls himself a pariah of the free press, arguing that his views are often shut out because they challenge the status quo.
So he's saying that the media, instead of challenging power, often actually reinforces it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he uses some pretty stark examples to illustrate his point.
Like what?
Like how media coverage often downplays or ignores atrocities committed by U.S.-backed regimes.
Okay.
He gives the example of the Indonesian invasion of East Timor.
Right.
His argument is that the focus is often on the crimes of official enemies while ignoring those committed by the U.S. or its allies.
Wow. So if the media is kind of filtering the information that we receive, how can we be sure that we're getting like a complete and accurate picture of the world?
That's the challenge Chomsky lays out for us,
Mm-hmm.
to develop critical thinking skills and to seek out alternative sources of information.
Okay.
We can't just passively accept the narratives presented to us.
Right.
We need to be active and engaged citizens, constantly questioning what we're told and why.
So it's not just about being informed, it's about being critical of the information that we receive.
Exactly.
And this ties directly into Chomsky's critique of the concept of national interest, right?
Yes.
He sees that as a tool that's used to manipulate the public and kind of mask the interests of those in power.
Precisely.
So what does he suggest we focus on instead?
He suggests that if we want to understand how societies really function, we should focus more on class interest, which often reveals that decisions made in the national interest frequently benefit a particular class or group within society, rather than the entire population.
Hold on. If national interest is an illusion, what does that say about how U.S. foreign policy gets justified?
That's a great question, and it leads us right into Chomsky's critique of U.S. foreign policy.
Okay.
He sees U.S. interventionism not as a force for good, but as a means of maintaining global dominance and preventing the spread of ideas that challenge the established order.
So he's essentially arguing that what's presented as protecting freedom or democracy is often a cover for maintaining control and power on a global scale.
That's one way to put it.
Okay.
And he points to historical examples to support this view, citing interventions in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East.
But doesn't the U.S. intervene to protect its own security? What about the Cold War? Wasn't that about containing the spread of communism?
Chomsky challenges that traditional view of the Cold War as a purely ideological struggle between capitalism and communism.
Okay.
He argues that both the U.S. and the Soviet Union used the threat of the other to justify military buildups, interventions, and control over their own populations.
So you mean he thinks that neither side's ideology was completely sincere?
Precisely.
That the Cold War was more about power and control than an actual, battle of ideas?
Exactly. Chomsky argues that both superpowers benefited from perpetuating a state of conflict and tension.
So if the Cold War wasn't just about ideology, but about power and control, what does that mean for how we understand global politics today?
It raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And that's really what Chomsky's all about.
Yeah, it seems like he's encouraging us to be skeptical of the official narratives and to really look deeper at the underlying power dynamics.
He is.
Okay.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Chomsky's analysis of power, propaganda, and the illusion of national interest is just the beginning. We still need to explore his ideas about human nature and what a libertarian socialist society could actually look like.
This is all pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
I can't wait to dive into the rest. So what stands out to you so far about Chomsky's analysis?
I think what I find fascinating is how he connects all of these seemingly disparate ideas to create like a coherent and challenging critique of the systems that we live under.
I agree. It's a lot to process, but it's clear that Chomsky really wants us to look beyond the surface, to question assumptions, and to be critical of the narratives that we're told.
Absolutely.
It's making me rethink a lot of what I thought I knew about the world.
Me too. So, as we've been discussing Chomsky's views on power and propaganda,
Right.
it's clear he wants us to see how these forces shape our understanding of the world. But he doesn't stop there.
Cool.
He goes even deeper.
Where does he go?
Challenging traditional views of human nature itself.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting for me, because he argues that human beings are fundamentally creative beings.
Yes.
Not just these self-interested individuals always trying to maximize their own gain.
Right.
I mean, that goes against so much of what we hear about economics and human behavior, right?
Exactly. It's a radical departure from that classic economic model that portrays humans as rational actors, primarily driven by self-interest.
Right.
Chomsky draws inspiration from thinkers like Wilhelm von Humboldt,
Okay.
who saw creativity as the core human need,
Okay.
essential for our well-being and flourishing.
Okay. But isn't that a bit rosy? I mean, people can be selfish, lazy.
Right.
How does that fit into Chomsky's vision?
That's a great question. Chomsky acknowledges that humans are complex,
Yeah.
but he believes that our current systems actually encourage those negative traits.
Okay.
He argues that if we can tap into this innate creativity, if we can create a society that values and fosters it,
Okay.
we can unlock this incredible potential for positive change.
So he's suggesting we need like a complete paradigm shift.
Yes,
A fundamental change in how we understand ourselves and our place in the world.
precisely. And Chomsky believes that this shift is essential for creating a more just and equitable society.
Gotcha.
He argues that our systems prioritize competition, individualism, and accumulating wealth above all else, which he would say stifles our creativity and prevents us from reaching our full potential as human beings.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into Chomsky's alternative then. What does this libertarian socialist society actually look like? Paint me a picture.
So he talks about a society built around self-management,
Oh,
where individuals have control over their own work and communities manage their own affairs through direct democracy and federated structures.
so instead of top-down control, decision-making power is spread throughout society.
Exactly.
So instead of like some distant city council deciding what happens in my neighborhood park,
Right.
the residents themselves get to vote on how it's used.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's self-management in action.
That's a great example.
Okay.
Chomsky believes that individuals and communities are best equipped to make decisions that affect their own lives.
Okay.
And he sees libertarian socialism as a way to empower people and create a more participatory and democratic society.
But he doesn't just pull these ideas out of thin air, does he? I mean, are there real-world examples of this kind of system working?
He does draw on historical examples to support his argument.
Like what?
He points to anarchist movements and experiments in worker self-management.
Okay.
One example he cites is the Spanish Revolution of 1936,
Okay.
where workers and peasants created a system of self-governance and collective ownership, directly challenging the traditional power structures of the state and the capitalist class.
So these aren't just theoretical ideas. He sees historical precedents for this kind of society.
Yes, and those precedents offer valuable lessons for how a libertarian socialist society might function.
Okay.
They highlight the challenges and possibilities of self-management, showing that it's not just some utopian dream,
Right.
but a potential path for organizing ourselves differently.
Okay, but let's get practical for a moment.
Yeah.
How would a libertarian socialist society address those jobs that no one really wants to do? Like,
Right.
who's cleaning the sewers or working on an assembly line if everything is about individual creativity and self-management?
Chomsky acknowledges that this is a valid question.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the fact that some work is necessary for society to function, even if it's not inherently enjoyable or, creatively fulfilling.
So what's the solution?
He suggests these less desirable tasks should be shared equally among members of society.
Okay.
He believes technology could play a role in reducing the burden of such work,
Okay.
but ultimately it's about collective responsibility and ensuring that the costs and benefits of social life are distributed fairly.
Like a social contract,
Mhm.
where everyone contributes to the whole, even if it means sharing the less glamorous tasks.
Exactly. And Chomsky believes this kind of shared responsibility is more likely to emerge in a society that values cooperation and mutual aid,
Okay.
rather than competition and individual gain.
That makes sense, but it seems like a radical shift from how things work now.
It is.
So if this libertarian socialist model is so great, why hasn't it been adopted more widely?
Right.
What are the obstacles?
Chomsky argues that the biggest obstacles are not logistical or economic, but ideological and political.
Okay.
He believes that those in power have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo,
Yeah.
and that they use institutions like the media, education systems, and the government to reinforce existing power structures.
He talks about challenging what he calls the national security state,
Yeah.
that kind of web of institutions and ideologies that justify concentrating power in the hands of a select few.
Yeah.
But if those institutions are so powerful, how do we even begin to challenge them?
Chomsky argues that breaking free from the system requires not just changing policies, but transforming our fundamental understanding of power, authority, and the purpose of society.
That sounds like a daunting task.
It is.
Does he offer any concrete steps for achieving this transformation?
He believes it requires mass movements and grassroots organizing.
Okay.
People coming together to challenge those in power and demand a more just and equitable world.
So it's not about waiting for some big revolution.
Right.
It's about starting to build the world we want to see right now in our own communities.
Precisely. He encourages people to experiment with new forms of organization,
Like what?
like worker cooperatives, community gardens, and alternative media outlets.
So these are all examples of what he calls prefigurative politics.
Exactly.
Creating spaces where people can live and work according to the values they want to see reflected in society.
Precisely. And these small-scale experiments can serve as both a training ground for a new world and a source of inspiration for those fighting for a better future.
That's really inspiring, but it also feels incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can we be sure that these small-scale efforts will actually lead to lasting change?
Chomsky is clear that there's no single blueprint for social transformation.
Okay.
The path to a libertarian socialist society will be different in each context, shaped by specific historical and cultural circumstances.
So no easy answers.
No, but he offers guiding principles,
Okay.
key ideas to keep in mind as we navigate this complex terrain.
Okay.
He stresses the importance of direct action,
Okay.
people taking control of their own lives and communities, and building alternative structures outside the existing power system.
So it's about taking action, not just talking about it.
Exactly.
Got
And it's about connecting these local struggles to broader social movements,
Okay.
beating solidarity, and creating a more unified force for change.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about building a movement from the ground up,
Yeah.
while also working to shift the larger systems of power.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the role of intellectuals and academics like Chomsky himself?
Right.
Where did they fit in?
That's a great question. Chomsky sees a vital role for intellectuals and activists in helping to bridge the gap between theory and practice,
Okay.
connecting the theoretical insights of libertarian socialism to the practical realities of grassroots organizing.
So it's about creating a dialogue between those working on the ground to create change and those developing the ideas and strategies to guide that change.
Yes, and it's about fostering a radical culture,
What's that?
one that challenges the dominant narratives of our society and offers a different vision of what's possible.
So we need more than just political change. We need a cultural shift.
Yeah.
But what does a radical culture even look like?
Think of it as creating a whole way of life that embodies the values of freedom, equality, and solidarity.
Okay.
It's not just about art or music.
Yeah.
It's about how we interact with each other, how we organize our communities, how we consume and produce goods and services.
So it's about living those values in our everyday lives,
Yeah.
even if the larger systems haven't caught up yet.
Exactly. Chomsky believes this radical culture is essential for sustaining social movements
Okay.
and inspiring people to keep fighting, even when the odds seem stacked against them.
So it's about creating that sense of hope and possibility, a belief that another world is not just possible, but already being built piece by piece by those challenging the status quo.
Right. He reminds us that this struggle won't be easy.
Yeah.
There will be setbacks and challenges along the way,
Yeah.
but we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There are others all around the world who share this vision. Chomsky leaves us with a sense of urgency,
Yeah.
a feeling that the time to act is now that the fate of our world hangs in the balance.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. So what are your biggest takeaways from all this?
Yeah.
What strikes you most about Chomsky's ideas?
I think for me, it's Chomsky's just unwavering belief in the power of human creativity and our capacity for social transformation.
He doesn't offer easy answers, but he challenges us to think critically, to question everything, and to never give up on the fight for a better world.
Right.
It's inspiring, to say the least.
It is. And it's not just about, like, armchair philosophizing.
Right.
Chomsky is all about action.
Yeah.
Remember what he said about challenging power structures?
Yeah.
It's not enough to just critique the system we have, to actively work to dismantle it and build something better in its place.
Right, and that's where I think his ideas about libertarian socialism and self-management come alive. You know, he's not talking about some abstract utopia.
Right.
He's talking about people taking control of their lives, their workplaces, and their communities.
Yeah, he believes that by building alternative structures and experimenting with new ways of organizing,
Right.
we can start creating the world we want to see, even within the limitations of the current system.
It's like planting seeds of change.
Yeah.
Nurturing those seeds and watching them grow into something powerful and transformative.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I like that image.
Yeah. And remember all those concrete examples Chomsky gave of prefigurative politics?
Yeah, like what?
Worker cooperatives, community gardens, alternative media outlets.
Right. These are all examples of people coming together outside of those traditional power structures
Exactly.
to create spaces where they can live and work according to a different set of values.
Exactly. These spaces can be models for a different kind of society, a source of inspiration for those fighting for change.
Yeah, but Chomsky also emphasizes that these efforts can't exist in isolation.
Right.
They need to be connected to broader social movements, building solidarity and creating a more unified force for change.
Yeah. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, how do we do that? How do we bridge the gap between these local efforts and the larger systems that we need to change?
And that's where intellectuals and activists play a key role.
Okay.
Chomsky sees them as bridge builders, connecting the theoretical insights of libertarian socialism to the practical realities of grassroots organizing.
So it's about creating a dialogue between those working on the ground and those developing the ideas and strategies to guide that change.
Yes, it's a two-way street.
It is.
And it's about nurturing a radical culture, a culture that challenges the dominant narratives and offers a different vision of what's possible.
So much of our culture is about consuming and competing and striving for individual success.
Right.
Are you saying we need to completely reject that?
Not necessarily reject it, but definitely challenge it.
Okay.
A radical culture isn't just about art or music.
Yeah.
It's about creating a whole way of life that embodies values of freedom, equality, and solidarity. Think about how we interact with each other, how we organize our communities, even how we consume and produce goods and services.
So it's about living those values in our everyday lives.
Exactly.
Even if the larger systems haven't caught up yet.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of hope and possibility, a belief that another world isn't just possible. It's already being built by those who are willing to challenge the status quo.
It's a powerful vision, but I have to admit it can feel a little overwhelming.
Right.
Where do we even start?
Chomsky emphasizes that there's no single blueprint for social transformation.
Okay.
The path to a libertarian socialist society will be different in each context, shaped by unique circumstances.
So what advice does he give? What can we do as individuals to contribute to this change?
He stresses the importance of direct action, of people taking control of their own lives and communities.
Okay.
He encourages us to experiment, to build alternative structures outside the existing power systems.
So instead of waiting for permission or for someone else to lead the way we start building the world we want to see right now.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are countless others around the world who share this vision.
Yeah.
Chomsky reminds us that change won't be easy, but that we have the power to create a better future together.
That's a really empowering message.
It is.
I feel like this deep dive has given me so much to think about and, more importantly, so much to do.
That's what Chomsky is hoping for.
Yeah.
He wants to spark our imagination, our critical thinking, and most importantly, our action. He believed that a better world is possible, but it's up to us to create it.
Well, you've definitely sparked my imagination today.
Good.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with me and for introducing me to Chomsky's work.
Of course.
I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a long journey of exploration and action.
As you continue your own explorations, consider how these concepts might be applied to the challenges we face today. Could a shift in our understanding of human nature and social organization lead to a more just and sustainable future? That's something for all of you out there to ponder as you continue your journey.